Today, as we continue on our New York and New England road trip, we're spending day 2 in the Hudson River Valley, exploring the first American-born president, as well as the legacies of arguably the most prominent first family of the 20th century. So come along the journey with us, and we're excited to have you along for the ride.
And we're in Kinderhook, New York. We're going to check out the Fox of Kinderhook, Martin Van Buren, the first American president actually born in America, though his family, it came from the Netherlands. So we'll go check out everything about Martin Van Buren today.
Martin Van Buren was the 8th president of the United States, but the first to be born in the independent nation in 1782. All earlier presidents were born as British subjects. This area of New York held a predominantly Dutch heritage, and many spoke Dutch as their primary language, including Martin Van Buren, making him to be the only president to speak English as a second language. Van Buren's political prowess was focused on developing a strong and cohesive political party machine, with political skill and acumen that allowed coercion and compromise to forge the factions of political parties together toward common goals. His nicknames, the Fox of Kinderhook and the Little Magician, exemplify his ability to remain relevant during shifting times. On the back of the popular Andrew Jackson and the Democratic coalitions that Van Buren himself built, he won the presidential election of 1836. Yet while Van Buren can be praised for his anti-slavery stances, his refusal to admit Texas to the Union as a slave state, along with his failed economic policies, led to losing his quest for re-election in 1840. Lindenwald, named for the German linden trees near the property, was built in 1797, and Van Buren purchased it while he was president in 1839. A widower of 20 years at this point, Van Buren intended for this farmhouse estate to host political visitors and to serve as campaign headquarters for his multiple future runs at president. His closest confidants and associates were his own children, who lived with him at Lindenwald, including his young daughter-in-law, who served as White House hostess in the absence of a First Lady, as Van Buren never married again. Van Buren expanded rooms, imported custom-made wallpaper, installed some exotic features, and upgraded fixtures to include running water, kitchen ranges, and stoves to make his farmhouse fitting for his prominent political position. Yet he also expanded his farmlands and frequently strolled his gardens and orchards for moments of peace during troubling times, and ultimately retired to life as a farmer after losing an election bid in 1848. Van Buren helped build political unity during the era of good feelings, but he died in 1862 in a nation bitterly divided by civil war.
It's an old version of a pull-out couch. Every now and then when you're driving through New York, right down the road, sometimes your kids drive you crazy, and that's when you need about 1,000,000 milligrams of Prozac. Sometimes again, here in Red Hook, New York, you come across a fork in the road, you may run into a giant fork in the road. About an hour south of Lindenwald, and about 75 years later, we come to the home of Franklin Delano Roosevelt here at Spring Hill in Hyde Park, New York. Actually, this home was purchased by the Roosevelt family, and FDR himself was actually born here in the 1800s. FDR would live here as an only child for the first 14 years of his life before going off to boarding school, would eventually marry Eleanor and spend diplomatic visits here, loved this place, would spend time here, make over 200 visits himself during his presidential years back here to Spring Hill. But again, his family never really called it Spring Hill. When they wrote letters to each other, they talked about meeting each other at the place. FDR was eventually buried here, and this location, according to FDR's wishes, was given over to the people the day after he died, the day after his 4th term ended.
Born into a wealthy family, FDR's life afforded him the opportunity to indulge his love for seafaring and enjoying the water, as well as any modern conveniences that became available, and a quality education. Although stricken with polio as a young adult, leaving him physically disabled, he was able to take advantage of a dumbwaiter system that was already present in the elaborate Spring Hill mansion. Though a wheelchair ramp was installed into the library for Franklin to especially enjoy his stamp collecting hobby.
Franklin's mother, she bought one of the first washing machines that was available. She bought one of the very first ones. The future, he said, there's no future in TV. It's all in radio. We didn't get that right. We hold on our screens in our hands.
32nd TV ever made by RCA.
During the presidential years, Roosevelt opened Spring Hill to diplomatic visits and overnight stays for such profound leaders as Winston Churchill, King George VI, and Queen Elizabeth.
If it wasn't there, you wouldn't know what's going around the corner. It was installed by the Secret Service for that purpose.
And right near the home of Franklin D. Roosevelt National Historic Site and his home of Spring Hill, we have the Franklin Delano Roosevelt Presidential Museum and Library, the first presidential museum and library officially sanctioned by the National Archives. Let's go check it out.
The Presidential Library does a fantastic job of highlighting the context of FDR's election through the Great Depression and his many accomplishments. No matter one's political viewpoints, the museum recognizes Roosevelt's leadership, demeanor, and communication direct to the American people through his fireside chats, empathizing with the people despite his own advantages of a wealthy upbringing. The museum also impressed in its fair portrayal of FDR, widely considered by historians to be one of America's very best presidents. The displays also tackled difficult topics, like the inconsistencies of Roosevelt's New Deal policies and its lack of implementation among the African Americans whose votes he sought to attract. Similarly, the discriminatory policies of Japanese internment camps received notable mention as well. Furthermore, while the exhibits focus primarily on Franklin, a strong emphasis is also placed on the work of his wife Eleanor and their complicated relationship. After discovering Franklin's marital infidelity in 1919, Eleanor offered him a divorce, but the two recognized that they could both achieve their goals much better by working as colleagues, transforming their relationship from one of loving marriage to one more like a collaborative partnership for political and social reform, a relationship agreement that worked well together for the remaining 26 years of Franklin's life. The partnership-style agreement allowed Eleanor the freedom to be a champion of civil rights for women, African Americans, immigrants, and other disenfranchised populations far beyond what political positions Franklin may have been comfortable in taking himself. Her own outspoken nature and work is worthy of mention and inclusion in the museum, and was deemed outrageous enough in her own time for the FBI to carry its own file of suspicions against the world's First Lady. Before we explore more of Eleanor's work and contributions, the Presidential Library offers a peek into a small portion of the massive archives and materials left behind from Franklin's personal collections, gifts, hobbies, and loves.
These model ships of FDR. He loves his seagoing vessels. Both from his upbringing and exposure to elite wealth amongst his family, and then his own experiences, international diplomacy, his love for the sea. So many artifacts left behind from FDR for the public to view. From his ship collection, sculptures, his furniture. Definitely a fascinating figure, Franklin Roosevelt himself, his wife Eleanor, in similar and yet distinctively different ways at the same time.
The massive grounds in Hyde Park dedicated to the Roosevelts also includes the Eleanor Roosevelt National Historic Site, otherwise known as Val Kill. Named after an anglicized rendering of the Fall Kill Creek, the gardens, cottages, playhouse, and recreational grounds were utilized by Franklin and Eleanor as a relaxing diplomatic area where guests could unwind in the swimming pool, stroll the gardens, or just bask in the beautiful atmosphere. This area was also home to Val Kill Industries, a startup factory owned and operated by Eleanor and her closest associates, Marion Dickerman and Carolyn O'Day. The factory was a place for out-of-work rural farmers to learn and develop trade skills in an effort to retain some employment and keep the economy going at a personal, regional, and national level, serving as a testing ground for FDR's New Deal policies. After the New Deal was underway, the Val Kill factory closed in 1936, and Eleanor remodeled the building as a 20-room house with an apartment for her secretary of 25 years, Malvina Tommy Thompson. When she wasn't traveling the globe, Eleanor used Valkill as her base of operations for writing, lobbying, hosting, and discussing issues with politicians, world leaders, and United Nations colleagues fighting for civil rights, humanitarian aid, and opportunities for advancement of repressed populations. The grounds of Valkill were also the home to retreats and camps for underprivileged youth, as well as family retreats, picnics, and get-togethers.
Muggy. Unlike today, it's a gorgeous day here in the Hudson Valley, but typically summers are a little unbearable, so you'd sleep outside and just get some heat. And Eleanor actually slept outside until the first snowfall of the year. She said cold air was good for her constitution.
While Eleanor was always welcome at Spring Hill, it was here among the cottages of Valkill that she felt most at home. This was her place, and especially after Franklin's death, it was here that she conducted her business, and it was here where a young John F. Kennedy would seek her advice and endorsement as a presidential candidate in 1960. We had a great day exploring 2 centuries of presidential history, the lives of Franklin and Eleanor Roosevelt, and Martin Van Buren, as well as some quirky stops along the way here in the beautiful Hudson River Valley. So come along with us tomorrow as we head on down through some more of the Hudson River Valley and dive into Vermont and some of the wonderful nature and attractions that are there in the Green Mountain State. Follow along for day 3 as we hit those holiday roads.